we thrive the most when we are leveraging our strengths in service of something that's meaningful to us versus something that's purely superficial. And people who thrive the most are doing things, they're working hard toward meaningful goals. And there is a lot to be said for recognizing that our fear constricts what we do. And the more we're willing to get comfortable, practice getting comfortable being uncomfortable, then it expands us to do all sorts of things. Because when you're willing to feel anything, it emboldens you for everything.
That's Margie Warrell. She's a 5-time best-selling author, keynote speaker, leadership coach, and Forbes columnist. With 25 years of experience living and working around the world, she's dedicated her life to helping others overcome fear and unlock their potential. Her book, The Courage Gap, 5 Steps to Braver Action, shares how courage is essential for every worthwhile endeavor. So you'll learn 1, how to identify your insecurities and overcome them. 2, the 2 dimensions of courage. And 3, how to take action despite fears. And if you'd like the quick summary write-up version of the actionable takeaways, I recommend you sign up for the Gold Nugget email newsletter for free at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Makaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Margie. Margie, welcome.
Great to be with you.
Well, I'm super excited to hear your perspectives on courage. And I want to start by hearing, what's one of the most surprising and fascinating and counterintuitive discoveries you've made about courage in your career in researching this matter?
It's probably that courage is not always about stepping bravely forward, putting yourself out there, saying a big yes and climbing out onto the far limb. Sometimes courage is saying no, sitting still, doing nothing and reconnecting, disconnecting, pressing pause on all the doing and the bold acts of bravery and just reconnecting with who we're being and being still and being unproductive. That is sometimes even more challenging and requires even more courage than being busily in action.
Intriguing. Could you share with us a story that illustrates that?
Well, look, I'll just share from my own life. So I am someone who has a bias for action. I am someone who tends to be Energizer Bunny, sort of productive, doing. That's almost my comfort zone, is to be out there furiously working hard and doing a lot of things and juggling many balls. And that can be in some ways affirming of a sense of identity, and I'm in action. And so for me, over the years, is recognizing that there is actually a deep-seated fear of slowing down and doing nothing, because what if I become lazy? What if I never achieve anything again? What if this means I amount to nothing? What if? And so just looking at where fear is pulling the strings and sometimes pushing me into this state of doing and busyness, and actually confronting that and going, you know what? I don't have to do more to be worthy. I don't have to achieve more to be worthy. I am worthy. And actually right now, the most valuable thing for me to do is to just sit and pause and get really present and grounded in who I am and what I'm about, and rather than being in action. And then that enables me to then actually upgrade my action so that when I go back into action, I'm far more aligned, have far more clarity, much more intentional about what I'm doing. So does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Intriguing. And I'd love if you could share a little bit more in terms of what are the scariest things that may be lurking for us in the solitude, in the quiet, in that silence?
Yeah, well, we have to come face to face with just who we are at the deepest place, because it's easy. Busyness can be a great tool for distraction. When we're busy, it's almost can be addictive because it can be feeding us, giving us a sense of significance. And I mean, we all want to feel significant in our lives. It is to be human, is to want to feel significant in some way. And we can achieve that through healthy means, and we can achieve it through unhealthy means. And I think that the busyness can provide that sense of, oh, look at all that I'm doing. People are going, wow, aren't you doing a lot? And so the confronting part of just pressing pause on that is to go, who am I if I'm not doing that? And what are the deepest fears that are sometimes lurking there out of immediate line of sight? And I think for many of us, there's a deep-seated fear of being unworthy, of being judged and found wanting. You are not smart enough. You are not clever, capable, experienced, intelligent, educated, likable, lovable, leader-like enough. Insert something before the word enough. And I think it's part of the deep work of growing into who we can become, to kind of pull back the covers on those fears, because they're not always obvious, but they can pull invisible strings that shape how we show up, how we speak up, the presence that we give to other people, how we lead, whether or not we are tapping into our own intuitive sense of what's going on around us and what's going on for the people around us, so that we can speak into their listening and be someone that builds trust and others come to count on for the integrity and the character and the courage that we bring to situations, but not always loud courage, sometimes quiet courage.
And when you say enough, I always wonder, enough for what?
Yeah, enough of what gives us a sense of innate worthiness. And so, yeah, when people say enough, that can be many things, right?
Okay, enough for your life to fundamentally have value.
Yeah, for you, not your life, but for you to have value.
As a human being identity.
Yeah, and I think that we can carry sometimes a sense of inadequacy, in that we're flawed, fallible in some way. And of course, let's face it, we are all flawed and we are all fallible in some way. None of us get a 10 out of 10 on every category. That is part of the human condition, right? And so my experience for myself, but also working with people, many whom have achieved incredible success, there's often this insecurity in them that can be driving and actually can drive them to work really hard and achieve amazing things. But actually they get to a level, and that insecurity, if they haven't done the inner work required to make peace with their vulnerabilities, to heal those childhood wounds, then that insecurity actually can cap them and ultimately can be a saboteur.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love to get your pro take. You've been working with many CEOs of large organizations with your time at Korn Ferry and your own work. So just for funsies, could you share with us roughly what percent of super high achieving big deal executives have substantial levels of insecurity?
Well, substantial is a big word. So, but what percentage of high achieving executives have some insecurity? I don't want to say 100%, but I would say close to it, because we all have something in us that can feel insecure at times. We all have moments of feeling insecure. None of us are invulnerable to things that can trigger something in us. So I would say it's close to 100% of high achieving executives have moments where they can feel insecure, but it's whether they have their insecurities or their insecurities have them. And so when you use the word substantial insecurities, well, then that's where obviously there's a lot of insecurities that are running them versus them going, yeah, I've got this thing. This can make me feel insecure, but I'm self-aware enough. And that's where that self-awareness is so crucial to being a great leader, to being an effective executive, because we aren't being governed by our insecurities and our fears. And of course, our fears don't always show up as, oh, I'm really nervous. I'm so scared I'm going to mess this up. It's not necessarily paralysis. It's not panic. It's not outward, overt self-doubt. More often, those insecurities can show up as intellectualizing emotions, being controlling, not delegating downward effectively, micromanaging, second-guessing people, being someone that is not okay with being challenged.
Yes.
So people don't challenge because they know that, oh, this runs a risk. And so there's lots of different ways that our insecurity, and let's just be clear here, insecurity is just another term for an unfaced fear, an unprocessed fear.
Certainly. Well, so you nailed it in terms of that's what I mean by substantial insecurity. Like you have a hard time being wrong or letting someone else shine or clearly acknowledging humbly is like, yeah, you know a lot more about this thing than I do, so I'm going to let you take over.
Yeah, you bet.
And
So,
hey, I like your idea better than mine. Let's go with yours and forget what I said. Like,
and not just that, but actively seeking that out too,
Yeah.
and saying to people in the room, hey, look, I don't know everything. What is it that I could be missing here? And actively soliciting people to put forward opinions that may actually contradict, or if not contradict, may not line squarely up with your own. And when they say those things that you might actually disagree with, you might actually think they're wrong. And maybe they're critical of you and the judgment that you've made, that you don't get defensive and you go, wow, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. And that people never have to hesitate to say that. And to me, that is an indicator of a leader who has done their work and who is well and truly leading from values and not emotions and not insecurity. Because no matter what anyone says about them, they don't get triggered by that. They don't take offense. How could you say that? They're like curious, they're humble, they're eager to learn, and they listen with an ear to how they could be wrong. And then they always acknowledge when they've changed their mind, and they share that and go, I thought this, but yeah, I realized I was wrong. I wasn't factoring in these other things, and they can share that openly. And there's a lot of senior executives who are not in a place where they're able to do that.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I think you've painted a lovely picture on what I mean by substantial insecurity versus substantial security. So could you give us a very rough figure, like at the top levels, who's got that substantial insecurity and who doesn't as a rough percentage?
I would say a solid 50%.
50-50, all right?
Yeah, I mean, that could vary, and it varies in organizations because there's different cultures. So I've worked in organizations where the culture is very grounded in purpose and values and authenticity, and people who posture and who overtly ego-driven, that behavior they're like a white blood, they get ejected out. It's like, that's not how that they can be really brilliant at what they do, but it's like at the end of the day, people are recognizing, very ego-driven. They're an insecure person, even though they might be brilliant at what they do. And so then there's cultures where, it's about, what are your numbers? Honestly, we don't care much about all the other stuff. What are your numbers? And sometimes the people who get the best numbers are people who can be massively ego-driven and not the least bit, or very only mildly self-aware. And so it's all about, who's winning? Who's winning? And who can get the biggest number fastest? And that gets rewarded and that gets promoted. And so you end up with an executive bench of people who are all very, very ego-driven, competitive, but not necessarily it's particularly self-aware. Whenever executive teams don't make great decisions, and you see over time there's a leakage of value and the organization starts to lose edge and the culture grows, there's toxic elements to it and disengagement and higher turnover, etc. It's never because the people on that executive team lack intelligence individually or collectively, that they lack expertise and skill individually or collectively, that they lack access to information and resources. It is because of the ego. And, when I'm talking about ego, I'm talking like, I got to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. And there's a defensiveness, and it's that insecurity at play, because that undermines the dynamics in the team and it undermines the quality of decision-making. There is not open, candid conversations. There is silos. There is protecting of information. There is a whole lot of conversations going on outside of the room. There is not good upward and sideways feedback. All of those factors at play, they are what create this slow leakage of value that over time you see organizations start to lose edge. And so, it's not that they don't know what to do, it's that they're not doing what they know.
Yeah, this reminds me, we had Pat Lencioni on the show and talking about smart versus healthy with regard to teams and dynamics and how it's a lot of times they got the know-how, but in terms of the courage and going there and having those conversations, it's great. So it sounds like we're pretty strong on the case here for how having more courage will help you be more awesome at your job with regard to just feeling good, facing down those monsters, as well as better teamwork, et cetera. Any other key things you'd put forward in terms of the case for why professionals would be better off with an extra dose of courage?
Well, let me just share there's two core dimensions to courage. And we often focus in on the feel the fear and do it anyway. Be bold, take a risk, put yourself out there, set a bold vision, have the crucial conversations, take those risks for yourself professionally in terms of then leading how you manage others. But what we often fail to factor in is the second dimension of courage, and that is the regulation of our fear, the management of our anxious thinking. Because courage is action in the presence of fear and the presence of risks, real or perceived. But often we're more afraid than we need to be. And right now, it's a perfect case in point. There are a lot of people right now who are feeling incredibly anxious because there is immense uncertainty. Yes, there is a new administration in the White House. There has been massive disruption. The markets are volatile. People are worried about the future. But you know what? There's always been uncertainty. We've always had disruption. And yes, it may feel like, oh no, but not like this. But these times have come before and they've gone before. And so a lot of the time we are victim to what's called certainty bias. When we look back at the past, we know how the story ended. So we go, no, it wasn't like this, because we don't know how the story's going to end. But 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this moment right now and go, oh, well, it worked out, and because there's going to be new uncertainty. So often people are feeling more anxious than they need to be, and anxiety magnifies our perceptions of risk. And people pull back and they triple on what they can control and they try and find certainty. So they get really short-sighted. And then they fail to take the very actions that would actually expand future possibilities, that would grow and accelerate learning curves so that they'd be in a better position for whatever unfolds out the other side of this disruption, whether that's Gen AI, whether that's regulatory policy changing, et cetera. And so I think it's just so important for people to realize it's not just about be brave, is put yourself out there. It's also going, where am I scaring myself because of how I am perceiving all of the risks and all the uncertainty and all the unknowns? And where am I being a little short-sighted and not looking far enough ahead to the horizon and go, what is it that I could be doing right now that will put me in a better position 1, 3, 5 years from now?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, can you share with us what are some of your favorite tips, tricks, interventions, actions, things to do to get more courage?
Well, obviously, in the Courage Gap, I talk about 5 key principles for closing that gap between what we could do and what we actually do, between our insight and the impact we make for ourselves, for others. And the first one of those principles is focusing on what it is that you want. What is the highest outcome you want to achieve? And that could be right now today with an employee, my boss, a coworker I'm having a difficult time with. There's a lot of frustration. Maybe I'm feeling really resentful toward them. Maybe I'm feeling underappreciated. So ask yourself, what is your highest intention for that relationship? Or if it's your career, what is my highest intention for my career over the next 1 year, 3 years, 5, 10? Because if we're not clear about what it is we want, our vision and our values, then our attention is going to be held captive by what it is we don't want. Because fear is a really potent emotion. We naturally gravitate to the negatives, to what's wrong, to what we can't do, to what we hope won't happen. And so there is a huge power that we unlock within ourselves, but also it expands our field of a vision of what actions we can take when we connect to what it is we do want and what our highest intention is, what our ultimate outcome is. Because what we focus on expands. Energy multiplies by a factor of what our attention is on. And so that is a key principle. And many people don't realize how much of their time and how much of their energy and how many of their conversations are all about what is wrong and what can't be done and what shouldn't have happened and what a pain their boss is or what a pain this colleague is versus what can they do? What do they have? What do they want? How can they work better with this colleague? How can they help foster a better relationship with their boss? And putting your attention on that and being, well, what's a creative way I could go about doing that versus kind of being stuck in either a self-pity, feeling like a bit of a victim or getting stuck into a blame, like, oh, or just having a story that we are powerless to improve our situation, which is never true. And the biggest way we disempower ourselves is telling ourselves we can't do anything.
Now, when you say highest intention, you mean highest in the sense of most noble and in fulfillment of our deepest, most important values, as opposed to just a really big achievement, like high, like Mount Everest high.
The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. So you can have a really high intention to live a life of adventure and do amazing things. And that means you want to climb Mount Everest. But it also could mean I want to have a really good relationship with the people on my team. I want to do what I can to be the kind of person that I would want to work with. But the highest intention, whatever it is, it has to align with our deepest values. Mm-hmm. So what are your deepest values that want to define you and how you live your life? And it's funny you mentioned climbing a mountain. Several years back, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my husband and our 4 teenage children, which was a pretty bold, audacious undertaking at the time because we lived at sea level in Australia. We didn't go mountain climbing on weekends for fun because there weren't any mountains near us. And so it was pretty bold to kind of go, all right, let's do this. But one of my kids, Ben, said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to climb Mount Kilimanjaro for Dad's 50th birthday? He did this whole PowerPoint deck. He rallied the whole family behind this vision of climbing to the rooftop of Africa for Dad's 50th. Our family will always remember it. So we created an intention for it as a family, right, to do this thing that would be so cool. There was a chance we weren't going to get to the top. The altitude can really take a toll on our bodies, particularly younger bodies. My youngest was 13 at the time. But that intention to do that is what kind of galvanized our collective resolve to go, let's try. And as it was, we did make it to the top of Kilimanjaro. It was a really tough day. But our intention will always align with some value. I mean, I have no desire to climb Mount Everest after climbing Kilimanjaro. But for us as a family, like this would be a really cool thing to do as a family. That was a value. But for some people, it could be, I want to just build a business that contributes to my community, that serves the needs of these customers, these people in my local geography. Or maybe it's to do something that's on a global scale, but there's still a value that it's aligned with. But for people listening to this, I know for me professionally, I have always wanted to do work that aligned with, one, yes, my value to make an impact for others, to help others live their purpose, to use their talents for the greater good, but also to use my talents in a way that honors those talents. And so we all have different talents. People, we come out of the womb with different gifts, and yes, we have to hone them. But so it could be that you just really want to do something that lights you up. You're leveraging your strengths fully. We thrive the most when we are leveraging our strengths in service of something that's meaningful to us versus something that's purely superficial. And while when we're younger, sometimes it is superficial. As we go through life, people who thrive the most are doing things, they're working hard toward meaningful goals.
Yes, I guess that's what I'm zeroing in on when I say highest intention, is it's like you could have, maybe you want to build a business to prove everyone wrong. They thought I couldn't do it, and look at me now. Or it's like, I want to have a sick Lamborghini. So these are things that motivate some people. But I'm guessing that if we dig deeper into the values work, those wouldn't be, in fact, the highest intention that have the most potency for boosting the courage.
Yeah. Well, look, and and if you love cars and you want to have a Lamborghini, like great, knock yourself out and work hard for that Lamborghini. I'm not a car person myself, but if your sense of security and identity is coming from sources outside of yourself, then you will always feel a little insecure. Because once you've got that Lamborghini and you drive it right up the main street of town and you got the music blaring and you're making sure everyone's looking at you and they're like, wow, you've got a Lamborghini. It's like, great, it feels good. Like, yeah, see my Lamborghini. But okay, after a while, it wears off. We habituate to, okay, now what do I have to do? Because it's a cup with a hole in the bottom. It's never going to fill up if your sense of worth and value has to be externally validated all the time. And that's not to say it's natural to want to have external validation. I love external validation. But if that's what our identity is built on, it's going to be built on a house of cards, because what happens if you lose your Lamborghini? What happens if you lose all your money? That can happen. That does happen to people. And so I think we have to be really careful about where our sense of identity comes from. And there is no greater source of identity than being really living in alignment with our values. It is got to be an internally sourced identity versus externally validated all the time.
Okay. So we got 5 principles. The first is the highest intention. What's next?
Second is re-scripting the narratives that are keeping you stuck, stressed, or living too safely. So, of course, we all tell ourselves stories all the time, like, oh, it's a nice day out there today, as it is, where while I'm talking to you, I can see the cherry blossoms coming out here in North Virginia. But sometimes our stories get in our way and keep us from doing the very things that would serve us. So our stories can stoke up our fear. They can make us feel more stressed, like we tell ourselves stories, oh, it's the end of the world. I'm never going to get another job. I'm too old. There's a lot. I'm surrounded by people who use even language. It's a nightmare situation. I'm never going to be able to figure this out. And so they make themselves feel more stressed than they need to be. But sometimes our stories can give us air cover for living too safely, for going, oh, well, it's not so bad. And, everybody else has got it worse than me, or at least I've got a job. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not happy in your job. Yeah, but at least it pays the bills. I'm like, come on, like life's short. And so we can often tell ourselves stories that keep us from taking the very actions we're wholly capable of taking. Sometimes we tell ourselves lies. We call them vital lies, the soothing myth truths that spare us from having to look at ourselves and go, what is the price I'm paying for the story that I'm telling myself? It's making me feel okay in the moment, but it's actually keeping me stuck. It's actually keeping me from connecting in more meaningful ways with other people, or making a change that I know deep, deep down I really need to make, because I'm not feeling a sense of purpose. I'm not feeling like I'm living the life I want to be living. And so just recognizing that if your stories aren't making you feel more powerful, like they're not empowering you, if they're not aligning with something that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, and if they're not making you feel more positive about your future, then your stories are working against you. And I often say to people, like, tell me, what's your ultimate vision of success? And then they'll go, well, and when they let themselves really connect with that vision and they focus on what they want, I'm like, well, what story would you need to be telling yourself for that to become your reality? Because our beliefs are the software of behavior. Everything we do is belief driven. So what's the story that you need to tell yourself so that you'll take the actions to create the outcomes you want? And if you're feeling stuck in your career, or you're feeling like you're hitting your head against a wall, I would just say to you, like, what's the story you've been telling yourself? And what emotions does that create? Where is that keeping you playing too small? Where is that keeping you stuck in excuses? Where is that keeping you showing up in a more diminutive way than really serves you? And so what's another story you could tell, and re-script that story? Because you create your stories, but your stories then create you.
Okay. And the third principle?
The third principle is about embodying courage and connecting to the sources of courage within us, but also around us in our relationships with others. And often we don't recognize how we're moving through the world in an anxious state. John Wooden, the great iconic basketball coach, once said, it's not about how tall you are, it's about how tall you play. And often we don't realize how much fear is trapped in our bodies, keeping us from showing up, stepping up, speaking up, walking into a room in a way that not only changes how others perceive us, but changes how we perceive ourselves. Some great research out of the Kellogg School of Business that found that postural expansiveness literally shifts how people perceive us as well as how we perceive ourselves, regardless of our actual status on an organization chart. And so just stand tall and take a deep breath and reset your nervous system, named a nervous system for a reason, at that ground level. And likewise, connect with people around you who make you feel braver, who help to quell the doubts versus to feed them.
All right. And the fourth?
That's about stepping into discomfort and really resetting our relationship with discomfort. All of us are wired to want to avoid what's uncomfortable, but the more willing you are to do uncomfortable things and embracing discomfort, embracing the growing pains, it actually will expand your behavioral repertoire to do the very things that are going to set you up for success. And there is a lot to be said for recognizing that our fear constricts what we do. And the more we're willing to get comfortable, practice getting comfortable being uncomfortable, then it expands us to do all sorts of things. Because when you're willing to feel anything, it emboldens you for everything.
All right. And the fifth?
And the fifth is all about making peace with our failures and making peace with ourselves for failing to show up as the person we most want to be sometimes, because no one is brave all the time. And the more we can be kind to ourselves in those moments when we either try something and fail or we fail to try and that little inner chicken little wins out, then the quicker we'll be able to pick ourselves up, to dust ourselves off, to learn the lessons that our failures and our mistakes hold, and then to move forward more wisely. And for those who are listening who can be really hard on themselves, I think this final step, which is about finding the treasure when you trip, can be the biggest unlock, because we're so often really hard on ourselves. And when you're really hard on yourself, it doesn't make you braver. It actually makes you live a little smaller and hold back from taking the very risks that would serve you most.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the rescripting narratives for a bit. Could you give us a common narrative that you've seen hold folks back and an example of a finer script to replace it?
Yes. So as people are moving up in their careers, often they'll look at management, the leadership, and it's them, they over there. They don't care. They have no idea what's going on. They're also disconnected and removed from what it's really like to try and run this business at the ground level and deal with the clients, etc. And so there's this kind of othering of those people in management, those who are on the executive team. And the reality is those people were once in your shoes. And sometimes people become the they and they realize, if only management, I'm like, you are management. You are the they. Like, this is you. But wherever you sit on your career trajectory and on some org chart, recognizing that you have the power to be a leader at every level. And so rescripting it about how you see yourself and your own power. Like, I am a leader. I have the ability to influence change here. And sure, I mightn't have as much as the person at the top, but I have the ability to lead change in the sphere of influence that in my workplace every day. So that's one rescript. Another key one I hear people talking about is other people and saying things like, oh, they're so intimidating. They don't care. And they create negative narratives. And maybe there's some evidence to support them. But when it comes to saying someone is intimidating or something, that person is an a-hole or something like that, ask yourself instead, what is it that's going on in me that needs me to judge them? That person's going to be how that person's going to be, but how do I choose to show up? So I choose to show up as someone who is empowered and is focused on bringing value regardless of how the behavior of others around me. And by reclaiming kind of the power that I get to choose how I show up, regardless of what other people are doing. And that often when we call other people intimidating, actually, they're not intimidating. It's the story you're telling yourself about them that's making you feel intimidated. It's got nothing to do with them. It's got everything to do with you. So yeah, there's a couple of examples right there. I hope that's of value.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. Well, tell me, Margie, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we hear about your favorite things?
Well, I would simply say, if there's something that's causing you stress right now that's just keeps coming up again and again, maybe in different clothes, but it's a recurring issue. In there lays your greatest growth. In there is an unfaced fear. There is fear in some form that's kept you from addressing it more effectively. Maybe taking ownership for something that you're doing that's contributing to it, that you'd rather blame it on everyone else. But recognizing that those things that test you the most also teach you the most and can be the catalyst for your highest growth and transformation.
Big thanks to Margie for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsored checkout is Strawberry.me Career Coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. All right, thank you. Well, now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
And amen, life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage.
Okay. And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
My favorite study is the work of Amy Edmondson out of Harvard on psychological safety, and that it's the teams that report the most mistakes that are actually the highest performing because they feel safe enough to be able to share the truth.
All right. And a favorite book?
My favorite book would be The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck.
All right. And a favorite tool you use to be awesome at your job?
My daily planner.
And a favorite habit?
Reading wisdom literature first thing in the morning over my cup of tea in the early hours to set my intention for the day.
Okay. And is there a Margie original soundbite or nugget that people quote back to you often?
Yes. And that's living bravely is indispensable for living well.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
They can head over to my website, margiewarrell.com, or just connect with me on LinkedIn or anywhere that you hang out on social media, or my Live Brave podcast.
Okay. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Thank you. I invite people to take my courage quiz. If you head over to my website, to the Courage Gap page, you'll see the courage quiz. And I invite you to take it because it'll help you identify where the courage gaps are in your life and how you can close them.
All right. Margie, thank you.
Thank you.
I really love what Margie had to say, that fear is not only rushing into the burning building, doing the big, hard, scary thing, but also entering into stillness, checking in with yourself, and facing the interior demons, fears, insecurities, and looking at them squarely head on. And the cool things that can be liberated when that's done. Great stuff from Margie. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we referenced, please visit us at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1048. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.